This week in our Essential Skills for Woodworking series, we're going to talk about how I get a chisel scary sharp. Last week I released a how-to video filled with tips and tricks for dovetails, and one of the things I said in there was to do dovetails you have to have a really sharp chisel, and it really is mandatory. So in the interest of the holiday IG dovetail challenge and all the questions I got on that video, I want to talk about how I get a chisel scary sharp. So let me bring you into the bench and show you how I get this done. Before I get into the tools, let me just say I know there's going to be a few people who show up in the comments and say, oh, you should sharpen freehand. I just want you to know you're the best. So I like to use a jig. There's plenty of different options. This is a Veritas one. It's very good and very helpful for repeatable results. There's also lots of different inexpensive options that are out there. But if you're new to sharpening, a jig can be very, very helpful for you. There's a couple different types of stones and sharpening methods. There's water stones, which I really like when my chisels are really sharp already or just need to be touched up. There's diamond stones, which are great because they're always flat and they can remove a lot of material quickly. Also, I use my rough diamond plate to flatten my water stones. There's also flattening stones like this one here. This was a inexpensive one from Amazon. I hate this thing because it did not stay flat, so of course it's not very good for flattening. And then of course I have my strop, which is a piece of rough leather with stropping compound on it. This is fine stropping compound, which I recommend. It's great for touching up an edge. When you're done, you should be able to shave or cut a piece of paper very easily. So let me show you how each of these work. So when it comes to stones, I have two types that I use for different reasons. First thing I would recommend is getting one of these dish rags. These go in cupboards and they're non-slip. I just get these, they're like $2 on Amazon, and cut them up, and it's great for on your bench. It keeps things from slipping around. I have some rosin paper down below just to keep my nice Moxon bench from getting water on it, but that's not necessarily important if you don't really care about the surface that you're sharpening on. The great thing about diamond stones is they're always flat, they don't wear away, and they're great for removing lots of material. I also use water stones. Water stones are fabulous because they cut a lot faster, because the slurry you develop will also cut, and they really, I think, are better for getting a very, very sharp edge. So a lot of times what I'll do if I'm sharpening from the get-go is I'll start with my diamond stones and then go to my 8,000 grit stone to finish it up and then go to my strop. So these take different types of lubricants. With diamond stones, I just use Windex. And then with water stones, obviously you soak them in water. The way that works with diamond stones is you have like a bucket of water and you put them in, and you'll see they're going to start to bubble, and you want to leave them in there until they stop bubbling. So you can see they've stopped bubbling, so they're ready to use. I'm going to go ahead and put those aside for now. We'll use those in a minute. I'm going to let them soak as much water as they can. And then for diamond stones, you just use Windex as a lubricant. I just put a little spritz on there. I'll do it every 30 strokes or so. I'll put a little bit more. And then when it comes to setting up your jig, this Veritas one is very easy because you have this guide plate here that you can set to different degrees depending on where this is set. The roller can be used. There's a micro adjust thing, so if you want to do a micro bevel, you can. So when I'm setting up my jig, the most important thing is that your chisel is square. So if you don't have the Veritas one, you can use any square and just set it to your jig and make sure that your chisel lines up with it. You want to be roughly in the middle. With this guy, it's very easy. We have it set to 30 degrees here. Typically for a chisel, you would start sharpening at 25 and then do your micro bevel at 30. So we're going to start at 25 here and begin sharpening. So for this one, I'm just going to take my chisel, put it right against that reference and tighten it in there, and then just take off the guide here. And then I'm going to start with my coarse stone here, and you want to make sure you use even pressure. You just go down the middle of the stone using even pressure, and then you can see where we're starting to get wear marks. So you can see that the stone itself, you can see the scratch patterns. One great technique you can use to see where you're sharpening, and if you need to do more, is just put some black Sharpie on there. And then you can see where it's removing Sharpie and if you need to keep going. But what's going to really be the key piece to this is you want to go until you have a burr, and you can just feel that on the back by slightly rubbing your finger. just like that, and you'll feel there'll be a piece of metal on the back that you can see. So we're gonna go ahead and keep going till we remove everything there. Do a little bit more Windex, and then we'll just do about 30 strokes. I like to do about 30 strokes per stone. And you can see I'm only getting the very top there. I'm working my way down the bevel. I'm sure you can see here there's a little burr forming, and you can just see it's like little pieces of metal right there. They're forming. I may be able to even move them a little bit just so you can see it. And you'll be able to feel that with your fingers. It's really hard to see with your eyes, but you can feel it with your fingers. And now that we've gone through every grit on our diamond stones, we're gonna move over to our 8,000 grit water stone. Okay, so water stones, they need to be flattened. And so what I like to do is I just take a pencil and I'm gonna draw a grid. And these lines don't have to be straight by any means. Ooh, left-handed. And getting these flat is really important because obviously you want your chisel to be flat. So what I do then is I take my coarse diamond stone and I'll just rinse it off so the Windex isn't on there anymore. And then I'll just take it on top and we go back and forth. And the reason you draw that grid, you can see from the last time I sharpened, there's a hollow in the middle. So we just, that didn't go the way I wanted it to. Here's a big tip for you. Don't put your water somewhere where you're gonna knock it off on all your tools and have to dry them off and oil all of them for 20 minutes. So, pro tip. Now let's get back to flattening our thing. As I was saying, there's a concave in our water stone, and so we just basically need to get rid of that. And that's how my water fell off. So we just keep rubbing our stone. We can add some more water there. And you can see all of our pencil's gone, so we know our stone's flat, and a good way you can test that is just taking the back and see how it sticks to it. Then you know that it's completely flat. So now this is again our 8,000 grit stone. We've got our burr, we've got our chisel completely done, but we're gonna switch it up a little bit here. And we're gonna do a micro bevel. So what you could do is, if you have this jig, you can simply just turn the roller wheel and just, it's got a cam on it that does like a 2-degree micro bevel. Or you could move your chisel back just a little bit, but you want to create a micro bevel, which makes sharpening in the future easier, so you don't have to go through that whole step where you grind down the whole bevel. You can just do the tip. And then about every 7 or 8 sharpening sessions, I'll redo the bevel. But we've got our water stone nice and flat. We're going to add some water, because again, on these, we'll use water for lubricant, just a little bit's fine. And we're going to do 30 strokes of our micro bevel. And with a water stone, you want to vary where you go. So I kind of do 10 in the middle and 10 on the side. If you look here, now you can see we're starting to form our micro bevel. And you can see I was probably pressing a little too hard on the right-hand side there, so I'm gonna focus on the left just a little bit. We're just going to keep checking. When you get to this stage, you really want to check. So there we go. We've got a pretty good micro bevel there. I got a little wonky on the side there, but that absolutely does not matter, because all that matters is just the tip. But we've got a perfect micro bevel there. We've got our burr on the back. And now it's time to make sure your back is flat. Now, the reason a chisel back needs to be flat is for a couple of reasons. One is it's a reference. So when you reference on your chisel, you're referencing off the back, and so you need that to be flat. Now, for me, I never am really gonna go more than an inch and a half tops with a chisel this size, so you don't have to flatten the whole back. How far up you go is up to you, but it is absolutely critical that the back is flat for your chisel to cut. And the reason being is that this bevel has 2 sides, the back and then this angle here, which we've now changed to 30 degrees. And so if the back is not flat and meets up perfectly with this 30-degree bevel, it's not gonna cut. So what I do with my backs is with my 8,000 grit stone, I just go back and forth, and it's easier if you start with just a little bit of the chisel and then slowly work your way. I like to work all sides of the stone, and again, we're starting to stick a little bit, so I'm just gonna throw a little water on there very carefully so I don't put it all over my stuff again. We're just gonna check the back. It's looking so good. We're gonna go just the first third there, and then the next third. You can see this is good. This slurry that's building up, that's metal that has been cut. And so now we can see that our back is almost looking to a mirror finish. So we're just gonna polish it a little bit more here. Now, if we look at this, yeah, that's looking really good. But, whoo, so it's already pretty sharp, but it is not scary sharp. It's not razor sharp. It's not shaving sharp yet. And you can tell, here, let me show you why you don't test your chisel by shaving yourself. That scar right there. That was a silly mistake I made. I went in at a little too much of an angle and had to wear essentially a cast for 4 weeks. But, so I always use paper to test. And you can see here, it's sharp, but it's not cutting like it should. And so it's time to strop. And now there's lots of different ways to strop. I have 2 techniques I use. One is this strop I made just out of leather and wood and an old piece of plywood. And I just use stropping compound. Now, here's a great little tip for stropping compound. You don't want it to be caked in there. Like, this strop is pretty much at the end of its life. So when you have new leather, what I like to do is I just do a few S's like this. And that's plenty. You don't want it caked on here like this. Like, it should look like it does here on the edges. You can clean these off, but they're really so cheap to make that it's not something you need to try and worry about saving. So with a strop, don't be shy about it. So what you want to do is basically you find your bevel by going up and down, you find where it's riding, and you really get in there and push. I'd like to do about 30 strokes. 1, 2. And you want to not angle it as you go, because that's going to round over. So when you get your blade, you want to lock your wrists in. You can see what starts to happen is it starts to get to be a mirror. And the more mirror-like it is, the better. So I know people who will do, 60 strokes on a strop, but I'm a 30 guy. I did lose count on this one though. So now we've done the top, but what that does is it creates a micro burr on the back. So now you want to do the back. And you can see that's really starting to get to a mirror finish there. I can see myself in it. Both sides, my micro bevel is looking really good. But again, the last thing you want to do is just do like 3 on each side. And that just makes sure there's no burr left whatsoever. And then we'll grab our piece of paper and give this a test. Oh, geez. Now that is scary sharp. I like to even take it a step further. Let's get this even sharper. We're gonna head over to the grinder and I'm gonna show you what I do over there. Okay, then after I've stropped, what I like to do is I have a polishing wheel on my slow speed grinder, and I get this high gloss metal polishing stuff here. And you can see it's pretty mirror-like, but I can still see some scratches. Now you don't want to do a lot of this. I only do 3 strokes per side because it's spinning so fast that 1, it could heat up your blade, 2, it can roll over the edge if you're not careful. So I do very minimal strokes on this, but it'll just put a final high gloss finish on it. And so what I do is I just take a little bit, I let it get up to speed, and then I just put a little bit of polish on there, and then because the wheel is spinning this way, I'm gonna hold my thing like this. I'm gonna lock my hand to this plate here so that way I don't let it get caught into the grinder. And I'm just gonna lightly touch it. 1, 2, at roughly the same angle as the bevel. 3. And now you can see that's at an absolute mirror. And then same thing with the back. Now be very careful because you don't want it to get caught in there. So I just go 1, 2, 3. Just like that. And you can see it's even more of a mirror finish there. Even more so than before. I mean, that is just slicing through paper. And this is the reason you don't try and shave your arm, because if it can do this to paper, imagine what it can do to your skin. I actually know. Just like that, just razor thin little pieces. So let's head over to the bench and wrap this thing up. So there you have it. That is a very scary sharp chisel. And when it comes to dovetails especially, and any sort of hand tool woodworking, having sharp tools is important, but don't be intimidated. Once I do my grinding of my main bevel on my chisel, it takes 30 seconds per chisel to touch that up. Just hit it with a quick 30-degree micro bevel, do a little stropping, you're good to go. In fact, when I'm working, I will, when I'm doing dovetails, I'll strop in between each corner, just give it a couple strokes just to really sharpen it. Matt Eslia, who's a friend of mine, had a great piece of advice, which is use cheap chisels for clearing out a majority of the waste, and then use your really good sharp chisels when you get down to the line. I don't know that not everybody has the luxury of having a beater branded chisels and a knife, but it was a great tip. So guys, go check out that holiday dovetail challenge. It's down in the description over on Instagram. You could win a $400 prize pack. Thanks for watching. Stay safe in the shop and have a wonderful day.